nothing can break, nothing can break me down. I'm the man, come round, and nothing can break.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the final day of the 6th Annual Florida Automated Vehicles Summit. Please welcome your host, Joe Wagner.
Good morning. Welcome back to the second half of the FAV Summit. Hopefully you enjoyed the reception last night. Thank you to Tico for sponsoring that for us. I also want to thank Port Tampa Bay for breakfast this morning. Anybody feeds me has a special place in my heart. So we're ready to finish out the day strong. I'd like to again thank the sponsors for their support and to encourage you to visit the exhibits. One more bit of housekeeping. The Shark Tank breakout session will be in the Il Terrazzo room, which is downstairs across the lobby. Our team is out there to help show you the way if you're not sure how to find that. And don't forget about our Conversation Corner, the place we've reserved out there. If you'd like to talk to some of the presenters who didn't get to a question you'd like, we'll encourage our presenters to go out there and spend a little time. And if you go out there and talk with them, they'll hopefully help you out. Our general session is starting now. I'm going to lead right into the first panel. This morning, one other bit of housekeeping I was supposed to do. Again, I want to remind everybody that the professional development hours are available for all the sessions this morning and the breakout sessions, and the papers for that will be found out right there where Dennis is back there waving both arms above his head. Well, now he's getting tired. He dropped down to just one arm. Anyway, so we'll get going with our first discussion this morning. There we go. Go right to this one. So the conversation about connected, automated, shared electric it's everything. It's not just the automobile. Building and supplying the technology is a private sector job, and as the picture shows here, it must address more than just vehicles. To achieve our potential with ACES will take time and money, but it will also require flexible procurement processes to facilitate development and implementation. It'll take establishment of the standards, the architectural elements, to include communications and data formats for equipment production, and education of our policymakers and budget approvers at the federal, state, and local level. We have a project that we're working on that you've probably heard about from many other people. If you have any questions about what we're doing, here's some contact information for us. I'm sure all these presentations will be packaged on our website when we're done, so if you don't get a chance to write it down now, please give us a call. If you really want to talk about the project, I encourage you to talk to Bob Fry. He's the guy running the show with our Connected Vehicle project. This morning, I have the privilege of introducing two professionals who are working at the national and international level to advance the implementation of ACES transportation technology. Mr. Neil Peterson has a career based firmly in the public sector, and Marcus Wells, a career that's developed in the private sector as a CEO for Siemens, a global technology leader. The interface of these two worlds must come together for us to realize our ACES transportation future. I'll introduce each of their presentations, each of them separately for their presentations, and then after they're both done, we'll open the floor to questions. First up will be Mr. Peterson. Neil, I've got to say some nice things about you first before you come up here. Neil has been the Executive Director of the Transportation Research Board since 2015. In that role, he provides Executive Director and leadership to TRB's technical activities, including its annual meeting of over 13,000 transportation professionals. If you haven't been to one of those, it's an experience, I tell you. How those are organized is beyond me. It's more than 200 technical committees, its conferences, and its publications, its peer-reviewed policy consensus studies, and its multimodal cooperative research programs. Prior to joining TRB, Neil spent 29 years at the Maryland Department of Transportation. He was actually my boss for 3 of those years, a long time ago, where he served the last 8 years as State Highway Administrator and Governor's Highway Safety Representative. Over his career, Neil has been involved in volunteer leadership roles in both TRB and the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials. He chaired a number of TRB and AASHTO committees, including serving as chair of TRB's Executive Committee in 2011. Neil, please come on up.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for that very warm welcome, and it's certainly a pleasure for me to be here this morning. So I am, as Executive Director of TRB, able to benefit from having about 7,000 volunteers who are experts in the various fields that we have, with a number of experts in the area of connected and automated vehicles. And I'm going to share with you this morning some of the priorities that they have identified in terms of issues that we need to be focused on. But before I do that, since perhaps not all of you are familiar with the Transportation Research Board, I just wanted to very briefly introduce you. We say we have three major functions: convening, research, and advising. Joe mentioned our annual meeting, which is held each January. This coming year, it will be January 13th to the 17th in Washington, D.C. We're expecting probably 14,000 attendees this year, 220 standing committees. We either sponsor or co-sponsor about 50 conferences and workshops, over 100 webinars each year, including on a number on the topic of connected and automated vehicles. And we like to say that we establish communities of interest. We have 4 research programs in our cooperative research programs: transit, airport, behavioral traffic safety, and the largest and longest one has been highways. And we have quite a bit of work going on in each of these programs related to automated connected vehicles. And I'm going to be talking about some of the specific research that's been going on in the National Cooperative Highway Research Program, NCHRP. We publish over 900 papers per year in our transportation research record, and we have a bibliographic database of 1.4 million entries, which I would encourage you to take advantage of. We're part of the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, and in that role we also do consensus policy studies on behalf of the federal government. To get more information, it's very easy to remember our website. It's trb.org, and I would encourage you to go there to be getting more information. One of the convening activities that we have just recently put together is what we call the Forum on Preparing for Automated Vehicles and Shared Mobility. And what we're trying to do is bring together a number of public sector agencies with private sector companies and research organizations to be actively discussing what the issues are associated with these two topics, to be developing white papers, to be putting together problem statements for research, to be tracking and sponsoring research as well. And the real long-term goal is to be recognizing that we need to be focusing on a number of issues that ultimately will increase safety, reduce congestion, enhance accessibility, increase environmental and energy sustainability, encourage economic development, and equity. And we try to keep those goals in mind, actually not just for this forum, but in terms of all the activities that we have underway at TRB related to automated vehicles and shared mobility. This shows you the types of organizations that are involved in the forum. Tom Byron from the Florida Department of Transportation is one of the members of the forum. We're very pleased to have Florida DOT involved. And if any of your organizations might be interested, please come up and see me either after the presentation is over or during the break. So one of the activities that the forum undertook was to try to identify what the top 10 critical issues are, to particularly be informing our research program. And I'm going to quickly go through these top 10 in reverse order. There's more information here than I have time to be presenting, so I'll just try to hit a few highlights. Issue number 10 is impacts on land use, how land use impacts automated vehicles and shared mobility. And I think we've all read about, heard about the question of, will particularly when we get to completely autonomous vehicles, will it cause more sprawl, people to be living further away from where they work in their activities center. That's one of the issues we need to be thinking about. But what will it do in terms of the urbanized area, the downtown areas as well, if we don't need as much parking? Or how about curb space management, those types of issues as well. And then issues associated with rural areas is one that the administration is particularly asking us to be thinking about. Issue number 9, implications for transportation planning and planning models. I've been involved in transportation planning for my entire 40-plus year career. And planning has really been based upon an assumption that what has occurred in the past and is occurring now will continue to occur in the future. But we have so much disruption going on, so much uncertainty associated with it. You know, we've been asked, for example, at TRB to be looking at the future of the interstate system, looking out 50 years in the future. When it comes to these technologies, I have a hard time looking out 5 years in the future. But how do we develop 20-year plans associated with this? How do we do planning in light of uncertainty? What are the impacts, particularly on travel demand modeling? And we have quite a bit of research going on right now associated with this particular issue. I'll highlight a couple a little bit later. Issue number 8, impacts of shared mobility on transit and vice versa. We've certainly read about a lot of speculation about what the impact of Uber and Lyft has been on transit, how much of the reduction in transit usage over the course of the last 5 years or so really has been as a result of these services. We've been doing some very interesting research in that area. It very much depends upon the context. It very much depends upon the type of trip. And it's not what you might think. It's not really changing commute trips that much. Where it really is having the much bigger impact is during off-peak hours and for trips to places like airports. But an issue that we really need to be doing a lot more thinking about, particularly in terms of how shared ride services can be helping on the first mile, last mile for transit. Issue number 7, potential impacts of higher level automated vehicles and shared mobility on travel behavior and freight movement. I talked about the models. Obviously, models are based upon changes in travel behavior. But how do we expect both shared mobility and automated vehicles to be ultimately impacting the amount of travel that will be taking place? And therefore, what impact will it have on congestion? What will be the behavior of road users that are driving when they have automated vehicles in the traffic mix as well? And then what will be the impact actually of zero occupancy vehicles? And I think this is one of the areas of big concern in terms of potential impacts on congestion. Issue number 6, addressing social inclusion and equity. And I think this is one of the really big, important issues, both in terms of potential benefits, but also in terms of making sure that we don't have unintentional consequences. So, for example, there's a lot of discussion about the potential of autonomous vehicles being able to provide services for the disabled community or for the elderly community that can't drive themselves. But one of the phenomena, for example, of the shared mobility services has been as they start to drive taxi companies out of business, the taxi companies are required to be providing a certain amount of service for the disabled community. What has been the impact of that? Looking at issues like that as well. Issue number 5, net positive and opportunities to mitigate negative social impacts of automated vehicle deployment and shared mobility. And again, many unintended consequences that we really need to be thinking about in areas like security, privacy, labor impacts, insurance. How do we end up measuring what these types of impacts are, and what do we do then in terms of trying to mitigate them and prevent them negative consequences? Issue number 4, infrastructure enablers for automated vehicles and shared mobility. Thinking about this and having been the state highway administrator in Maryland, I had to start thinking quite a bit from an infrastructure standpoint, both what did we need to be doing in terms of enabling the potential, particularly from connected vehicles, but also from automated vehicles, and then what would be the implications for infrastructure. What are, for example, the opportunities that we have for dedicated lanes that would enable us to be able to have many more vehicles per hour using those lanes as an example. So many different issues. Joe mentioned procurement issues as another one that infrastructure owners need to be thinking about. Issue number 3, state and local policies to ensure safety prior to deployment. There's a lot of thinking, a lot of discussion going on right now, for example, in terms of what are the appropriate roles of the federal government versus state government as we start to think from a regulatory standpoint, especially about safety issues associated with these vehicles. Historically, the federal government has had responsibility for regulation of vehicles, and state governments, particularly motor vehicle administrations, for regulation of drivers. Well, if the vehicle becomes the driver, or a computer becomes the driver, what is the relative role of the federal government versus state government in instances like that? What's the role of off-road testing versus on-road testing? And again, this is almost the Wild West in terms of different states, how they're dealing with this particular issue in terms of what type of on-road testing are they allowing to take place right now. Very interesting prospect is what are the standards that we have to have, and what are the issues that law enforcement needs to be thinking about associated with this as well. Issue number 2 is potential safety scenarios during the transition to highly automated vehicles. And both as we start to move through the different levels of automation, as well as thinking about issues of the mix of traffic between human-driven vehicles and automated vehicles themselves. So the implications, again, of the long-term mixed fleet create a lot of safety issues that we really need to be thinking through. And then the top issue identified by the forum was models for sharing of data. Obviously, a lot of data is being produced, both by automated vehicles, by the traffic management systems, by shared mobility services. A lot of this is private sector data. How does that data end up being shared? How do we integrate the data so that we can actually be converting the data into useful information, whether it's for planning, whether it's for design, whether it's for operations? The integration of this into larger data as part of smart cities as well as something that we need to be thinking about. So our next steps are to prepare a white paper for each of these top 10 issues, to be coordinating with research that is currently going on in our cooperative research programs, and particularly in our National Cooperative Highway Research Program, where we set aside $1.5 million each year specifically for connected and automated vehicle research. I'll talk about that a little more in just a minute. Making the white papers available, not just to forum participants, but to a broader audience as well. And really focusing in on what the specific research needs are, developing research problem statements so that we can be undertaking the research that is necessary. Here's the URL. I'm assuming that this presentation will be made available to you, but if you go to our website, trb.org, you can find more information about the forum and the forum activities that are taking place. I want to spend just a minute on what's going on in terms of both recent products that have come out from our NCHRP program, as well as new research that is underway. The first report that came out of this NCHRP 20-102 series was one on strategies to advance automated connected vehicles, a primer for state and local decision makers. And it goes through a number of these policy issues from the perspective of state and government policymakers, what they need to be thinking about, what options are for them to be able to be dealing with this. And I commend this as, I think, a very, very useful document, not just for government officials who are here, but actually for the entire audience. We've had several recent research products that have come out. I talked before about planning and modeling tools. This report has just come out within the last few weeks. Implications of connected and automated driving systems focuses particularly on motor vehicle code issues. A report that came out earlier this year in terms of the relationship between public transit and shared mobility services. That actually came out of our transit cooperative research program. And then a report that we expect to be out before the end of the year on dedicated lanes for automated vehicles. We have new tasks that actually have come out since the forum identified their priority issues. I think in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through each of these right now, but the top 10 issues that we've identified have been informing the research that we are on your way with. Our annual meeting is coming up, as I say, January 13th to the 17th. I would encourage all of you to consider attending. I'll give you a hint that early registration fees, which give you a discount, expire this Friday. So if you are interested in attending, I would strongly encourage you to register this week. We'll have a number of sessions there on the subjects of connected automated vehicles, shared mobility services, and larger, broader issues associated with transformational technologies. Number of specific issues that, again, in the interest of time, I don't have time to go forward. And then each summer, we sponsor, together with AUVSI, the Autonomous Unmanned Vehicle Society International, our Automated Vehicle Symposium. I know on a later panel, Jane Lappin will be here. She's one of the co-chairs of that Automated Vehicle Symposium. This year we had 1,700 attendees. Your symposium is starting to grow to be the same order of magnitude. And again, this brings together the technology companies, the private sector companies, the government regulators, the researchers, and it's become a must-attend event. Next year, it's actually going to be in Florida, in Orlando, and we would encourage all of you to attend that as well. So thank you. I look forward to the discussion, and again, I'll make myself available later outside as well. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Marcus Wells, CEO of Siemens Intelligent Traffic Systems in the U.S. The company offers advanced software and systems to modernize and improve urban and interurban traffic. In this role, Marcus manages all functions, including sales, R&D, product management, customer service, and drives strategic business direction. In November of 2018, he was also named CEO of Bytemark, Inc. Joining Siemens in 2001, Marcus progressed through a number of management roles throughout Europe and the United States. Prior to his current position, he served as Senior Vice President and Head of Global Sales and Project Management at Siemens AG, headquartered in Munich. Mr. Wells holds a business administration degree from Munich University of Applied Science and a Master's of Science degree in Energy Engineering from Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. Marcus, please come up. Thank you, sir.
So good morning, everyone. Also from my side, thanks for the quite lengthy introduction. It's really appreciated. Let me first also start that what I mentioned yesterday, that I'm quite thrilled to be participating and presenting at the Florida Automated Vehicle Summit for the third year in a row. And I think it's quite exciting to see the progress we are making as an industry when we talk about ACES. And if I think about the first sessions we had, we were mainly focused around connected vehicle technology and automated vehicle technology a little bit separately, and now we're talking about this in a more joint fashion. So sharing the road safely takes on a new meaning as the future of mobility gets closer every day. So it won't just no longer be the cars making room for bicycles. Privately owned cars will more often than not yield to shared mobility services, and humanly driven cars will more and more yield to self-driving vehicles as our cities are getting smarter. But if we are thinking about those topics around ACES, I think one of the complications if we talk about implementation is actually very simple, that we see that all these aspects thus involve an industry which is the car, which is an OEM, which is an industry as infrastructure provider, operator, or manager, we are not necessarily dealing with every day in the past. If we talk about the broad rollout and the success of automated autonomous vehicles or electric vehicles, and to a large extent also connected vehicle technology, we certainly have an interdependency on what the OEMs are doing. And I mean, I'm here to, let's say, also tell you a little bit with the luxury of being in Siemens that we are working with, let's say, all the major OEMs in their product lifecycle management process, that all of these topics are going to happen. There is a huge investment from the traditional car manufacturers, also the new players in the autonomous vehicles, which goes into that type of technologies. There is a true shift which we recognize in how the future of the cars will be developed. One of the companies which is part of our ITS group within Siemens we have recently acquired is a company called AIMSUM. And I think from their history, it shows very much also on, let's say, how what we are currently seeing in our industry. Some of you know AIMSUM because they are doing microscopic and macroscopic simulation of all types of transportation modeling. So they have very sophisticated mathematical models. So if we are building a new shopping mall and you want to know what are the impacts, let's say, to traffic and transportation, let's say, we can model it in a virtual world. One of the new products is a simulation tool which simulates all the data which the OEMs are getting in their self-driving vehicle. So all the different detection methodologies which are in that vehicle need to be a data fusion, a modeling, and also a kind of simulation before those vehicles hit the road. Because as we all know, before, let's say, self-driving vehicles are potentially truly ready for prime time, there need to be millions and millions of miles being driven, and we just can't do that only in the real world. There need to be some of these miles being driven in the virtual world, and this is what we are supporting the OEMs in doing that. And another company which is part of our bigger family is a company called TAS, which, if you know, the America Center for Mobility in Michigan, where a lot of the OEMs are included. We are also, let's say, supporting here the OEMs in the development, for instance, of, let's say, testing and validating those two new technologies. So, and long story short, I think it is important for all of us, whether we are traditional mobility provider, infrastructure provider, hardware, software integrators, that those elements which are not traditionally in our wheelhouse, that there is a big momentum. And I think another challenge is also quite simple if we look from an administration perspective, because if we talk about ACES and if we talk about shared mobilities, it's also a mix of potential agencies. Is it a transit agency? Is it a city? Is it a state who's actually driving that type of technology? And I think this is one of the key, let's say, challenges if we're moving forward. It is not only the technology, but we also find the business models, and I will talk about that throughout the presentation a bit on how we have some best practice examples here of being an infrastructure provider, moving to some extent, if this is, let's say, interest for the mobility into an operator, or moving into different roles in order to make this type of implementation happens in a true type of PP3 environment. So last year, when I was presenting, I talked a lot about connected vehicle technology and how this will radically transform our industry, and certainly it will heavily increase safety and also increase mobility. What we are essentially doing is building a digital twin of all the traditional ITS infrastructures, such as sensors, signs, signals, and detectors. Cars will become traffic data generators and information prosumers, heavily, let's say, changing the world. ITS technology will be done in the future, because ultimately the cars will tell us where they are. And ultimately, if we want to, let's say, provide information, whether this is safety relevant or just improving mobility, we will be able to address, from an infrastructure perspective, whether this is a central traffic management system or whether this is just a local infrastructure at a certain intersection, we will be able to address individual drivers and help them to traverse through a city or on a highway safely and efficiently. So I guess the point is that road trips today are still often painful, but it doesn't necessarily have to be like that. And this is kind of the core of our vision, is to increase safety, in mobility and increase throughput for individual I hope you can still hear me. For individual transport, something changed. I hope it was not me. Okay, so besides, let's say, the traditional safety and mobility aspects, by having those changes in ACES, there is certainly also a changes in what is our vision, because it's also increasing comfort of driving, and it's also, let's say, making public transit attractive, because in order to tackle the mobility challenges we see every day, we need a sustainable public transit systems to get on top of a lot of the traffic gridlock. The answer is often thought to be found in smart cities. And strikingly though, private sector companies, big corporations, startups, public sector sometimes manage to denigrate the idea of a smart city by using it as a favorable buzzword to do some pilots or test some technology. So I think it is important that, let's say, the future of a connected world, an integrated world, it's not just about connecting everything with everything else. We need to come from a use case. We need to solve a concrete problem in order, let's say, to have an impact at the end of the day for the drivers or for the public transit riders. And what you see here is nothing else than our vision as Siemens. And if we think about smart cities, then there are three elements to that. The answer to more cars cannot be building more roads. We need to consume the existing infrastructure more efficiently, and we need to increase throughput and safety by using our existing road network most efficiently. And this is our first pillar. At the same time, we all know that we have a diverse fleet of vehicles in our cities, whether this is traditional buses or metros or cabs. And already today we're having the Ubers, the Lyfts, the bike shares, the ride-hailing. And if we manage to integrate those publicly and privately owned and operated fleets into an integrated system that we can offer true door-to-door mobility, then I think we will also manage to get people off the individual transport, which at the end of the day is an important pillar to, again, increase mobility, improve mobility in cities and urban areas. And finally, if we want to move into a stage of true multimodal transportation, there is one important impact: the rider, the traveler. It needs to be easy and convenient, and we need road user-centric application which enables, let's say, the everyday commuter or the visitor in a city to plan a trip, book a trip, pay a trip in a true intermodal fashion, easy and convenient, that this type of technologies will have an impact. So I think we have technologies to address those challenges, but the technology at the end of the day will always be an enabler. And if we're talking about ACES, and if we're talking about all these fancy technologies, and now I will go a little bit through the individual cards if I hold the ACE in my hand. So the IT technology of the moment is certainly self-driving vehicles. And it's not a surprise, right? The wonder, the opportunity, the sleek design. And I very well believe that self-driving vehicles can play a major role in how to solve our current mobility challenges. Just because, think about the additional use cases this technology will bring. Think about those of us who don't have the luxury to sit in traffic every day, like elderly people or blind people. Self-driving vehicle will address that, right? But thousands of self-driving vehicles are still thousands of vehicles. And the traffic jam with no human driver is still a traffic jam. So rather than thinking one for one, and rather than thinking about an application of this technology where we bank on that every one of us as an individual will at one point in time change from a traditional humanly driven car to a self-driven car, let's rather focus as an industry on those use cases which are most realistic and also will have the strongest impact of this technology to the overall mobility ecosystem. And this is certainly in the shared mobility space and also in the public transport arena. I mean, we all know that companies like the ride-hailing companies of the world, they have one bug in their business model, and this is the driver. The the millions of losses they currently see in their balance sheet will only go away if we are successful with self-driving vehicles. And those of you who run a transit agency, they in some shape or form know why this is the case. Because the cost of, let's say, the driver, whether we like it or not, is a big part of how efficient this is. So self-driving vehicles, by using that, for instance, for areas in cities which are currently underserved because it is not economically viable for a transit agency or even for a private mobility company and operator to serve those areas. This is where self-driving vehicles can play a major role and solve these challenges. But the question is also how to move into a future that looks like the Jetsons while we are still dealing with an infrastructure which strikingly looks very similar to those we have deployed 15 years ago. So, I mean, it's not only the cars which are getting smarter, it's certainly also the infrastructure. And with connected vehicle technology, we will ultimately enable, let's say, the infrastructure, and not only intersections, also highway, work zones, road sections, whatever the case may be, curves, to communicate to the vehicle in real time. So let me maybe talk a little technical for a moment here. So with connected vehicle technology, the vehicle will transmit this position, direction, speed, latitude, and longitude 10 times per second. And the infrastructure is able to respond to that in real time by giving a driver a warning if he or she is on an impending red light violation, or a curve speed warning, or a wrong-way driving alert, or an alert if a pedestrian is stepping to the intended path. It turns out that in America, drivers, probably all of us, make a mistake which lead to a fatal accident once every 100,000 miles. In contrast, connected vehicle technology makes decision 10 times a second. So as an order of magnitude, 1,000 times per mile. So if you compare the distance between those two, these are 8 orders of magnitude apart. So this is like comparing how fast I can run to the speed of sound. No matter how hard I train, I will never really get there. So connected vehicle technology will certainly make our our individual traffic way more safer. And just, let's say, we've all heard the disturbing news earlier this year, which was which I think was the first reported accident of a pedestrian being struck by a self-driving vehicle, which led to the death of this pedestrian in Tampa, Arizona. And this is exactly where connected vehicle comes into play. In actually the project we are realizing here in Tampa with Joe and his team, there is one use case where we were detecting the pedestrians in the infrastructure, and then we use connected vehicle technology to give that information to the driver. So we constantly comparing the movement of a vulnerable road user, like a pedestrian, with the position, the direction, and the speed of the vehicle, and then we can plot potential crash trajectories and give a warning to the driver, or give a suggestion to a robot to apply an automated braking if a self-driving vehicle would be on the road and connected. So in very simple terms, we can predict collisions and prevent accidents from happening. And this is also the benefit what we see if we think about these technologies like playing together in a more integrated way. When how do you utilize connected vehicle in order to make self-driving vehicles a reality? So now, let's play the card of electric vehicles. As a company, I could certainly tell you, let's say, all the electrical buses we are proudly delivering to New York City, but I think what is maybe a little bit more interesting to the audience, although this is a much smaller scale, but I think potentially a very interesting impact, is what we actually need to do on the infrastructure side, on a city side, on maybe even from a grid management side of a city, so from a utility perspective. In other words, how to make cities ready for electric vehicle deployment, because it will happen, that the transformation from combustion engines to electric vehicles will this transformation is already on its way. So the California Energy Commission has awarded Siemens with a grant on how to develop a blueprint on how to make the city of Santa Clara electric vehicle ready. So this, in the heart of Silicon Valley, Santa Clara is a average, typical, mid-sized California city, which is representative for more than 90 other cities only in California. And with that blueprint, we are not only considering technical aspects, such as technology for charging infrastructure, or operations of that infrastructure, or IT integration. We're also considering economical aspects, such as the business model between utilities, between cities, cost-benefit analysis and business processes which need to be in place in a city in order to make that, let's say, to be able to catalyze electric vehicle technology in that city. And one of the key elements, what we're doing here, and this is why you may wonder why is, let's say, a company which is focused on traffic is doing that. We are using parking load curves. So some of you may not know what a parking load curve is, but we, at the end of the day, just using a parking event and an unparking event. And a parking event is a destination of a trip, and an unparking event is the origin of the trip. And by being able to distinguish whether this is a short trip, a midterm trip, or a long-term trip, knowing whether this is within peak hours or off-peak hours, and also taking into consideration the demographics of the city, of where this trip within a city is being done, where you can, let's say, also know on, let's say, what type of travel is happening here from a demographic perspective, and also taking into consideration whether this is a personal trip or a commercial, medium, light, heavy vehicle truck traveling. If we use those travel data and predict travel patterns and overlay this with high e-vehicle or high hybrid penetration data, we can generate a very good output on what is the impact on electrical grids in which parts of the city, because it matters whether it is a short-term trip from a personal vehicle, or whether this is a long-term parking event, maybe from a commercial vehicle, on what will be the impact on a grid, and what will be the charging technology I need, and how to operate that efficiently. So this is investments done in a smart way, and also, let's say, using the data, because we heard about how data matter and big data matter, and this is applications where we can easily access data, apply analytics, overlay those data, and make sure we make the right decisions as a city in order to, let's say, be ready for prime time if electric vehicles will hit Santa Clara or California in a big game. Finally, let's talk about the shared part of the equation. So we all know that, I mean, there is a big change in the mobility service, and I already mentioned that. There are our traditional mobility services, and then there are the new mobility services, such as an Uber and Lyft. And in addition, the self-driving vehicle will also change the business model and the technology of those type of companies. I think the best way to conceptualize the changes is just think about how you got here this morning. Some of you, let's say, may have taken your own vehicle, paying some parking fees in the hotel. Some of you may have just hailed a car in order to get here, and some local may have made it either by bike or by your own car to the next public transit station, and then get here to this event. So there is already a change in how we travel. This is already happening as may occur. And let me be a little bit provocative here. So there is this pattern that good things must be somewhat painful. And I believe that public transit in many of our cities is somewhat painful. And this certainly does not apply to each city. It certainly does not apply to New York, to Miami, to San Francisco, and also to a large scale of medium-term city. But how do we want a decision everybody is making, I mean, every traveler is making every day? Why do I want to use a mode which doesn't start where I want it to start, it doesn't end where I want it to end, it doesn't go all the time? And this is why people choose to take a car and get stuck in traffic. But we need a strong public transport backbone in order to get on top of the mobility challenges. And this is why we as a company, we focus on mobility as a service. And let me help you explain what I mean with mobility as a service. So we, from a technology perspective, we very simply integrate various modes of transportation in one open back-end system. And this is the bus, the rail, the ride sharing, the bike sharing, and then we feed those data into a smartphone application so that riders and commuters can book their trip, pay their trip, manage their trip, let's say in a seamless and integrated way. With that, we are, let's say, enabling true door-to-door mobility, and we are rethinking the way on how to get people not only from A to B, but from A to C. We have implemented this technology, since we are talking a bit global here, for instance, in Dubai. The Road and Transport Authority in Dubai has commissioned Siemens to integrate their monorail, their taxis, their ride-hailing, their car sharing, their buses into this one system and allow their citizens and commuters to do that. And one of the key elements why the RTA in Dubai has gone that part is they wanted to have their own smartphone app. And their own smartphone app, because with that they can reach out to their citizens and to their commuters, and they will get feedback of all these different services. And by the way, they get a plethora of data which they can use for transportation planning and other purposes. But I mean, it doesn't always need to start in this big scale like maybe a Emirate of Dubai is able to do. For instance, in Austin, my hometown, where we are, let's say, where we have done the mobile ticketing for years with the local transit agency, we have now included a trip planning software just to start with planning their trips in a real-time matter. And now we have increased, let's say, included ride-hailing in that and the newly ventured scooters in Austin. And with that, we have made successes in changing riders, not only those riders of public transport who don't have another choice, but making transit the choice or the mode of choice by combining that in a true multimodal way. So I'm leaving you with that. I think our transportation systems are not perfect yet. We still get stuck in traffic and we have too many fatal accidents. But we have great examples across the world, here in Tampa and also across the US, on how ACES technology can make an impact. I think where we need to move to is also considering this in more integrated fashion on how we can, let's say, how connected vehicle technology may enable self-driving vehicle technology, how, let's say, a shared economy can be benefit from self-driving vehicles. And if we're going, let's say, to that step, I think then we will see the true benefit in cities. And this is something which won't be solved by one company or one agency. I think it takes all of us in order to do that. We need our best and brightest in order to get this done. Thank you.
So we're running up against our time limit, but I wanted to ask Neil a question about one particular item he brought up, which is equitable access. As ACES advances, what should the public and private sectors do to ensure that equitable access and mobility are provided for the disabled, the elderly, and economically disadvantaged? What thoughts have you heard on that?
Okay, so the first thing is to recognize it as an issue. And I think that for many metropolitan areas, they have not yet started to recognize this as an issue. The second is that we really need to think through what are our goals, what do we want to achieve in terms of equitable access. And that will drive us then towards what are the tactical solutions. So, for example, the shared ride services are dependent upon people using smartphones and using either credit cards or debit cards. And I may not have these figures exactly right, but something like 22% of the population still does not have smartphones, and something like 12% don't have bank accounts. So it's impossible for them, and they tend to be the economically disadvantaged. So thinking about things like debit cards that are made available as subsidies for those who are economically disadvantaged. As regulations are being developed for shared ride services, particularly as we get to more automated shared ride services, what requirements are going to be placed on actual provision of access for the disabled, as well as the elderly, and learning from each other, so that there are individual cities right now that are starting to grapple with these issues. We need to be making sure that we're sharing what the lessons are in terms of what has worked, and probably even more importantly, what hasn't worked. I think too often we don't focus on and learn from the failures that have taken place. Columbus, Ohio, as part of their Smart City Challenge, is actually addressing this very issue right now in concentrating on how to be providing mobility to one of the economically disadvantaged areas of Columbus.
Thank you, Neil. I'm going to have to stop our presentation now. I'm going to ask these gentlemen to go out to the conversation corner. So if you have questions you'd like to ask, please feel free to go back there. We're ready to start setting up for the next group. Let's give a hand for these gentlemen. Nice job. Grayson, you want to come up with your team?
It's eating me up inside, but we ran our course. We pretended we're okay. Now if we jump together, at least we can swim far away from the wreck we made. Then only for a minute, I want to change my mind, 'cause this just don't feel right to me. I wanna raise your spirits, I want to see you smile. No, that means I'll have to leave. No, that means I'll have to leave. Lately, I've been thinking, I want you to be happier. I want you to be happier. So I'll go. I will go. So I'll go, I will go. Lately, I've been thinking, I want you to be happier. I want you to be happier. Even though I might not like
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Grayson Brult, the moderator for our next session.
Then only for a minute, I want to change my mind, 'cause this just don't feel right to me. I want to raise your spirits, I want to see you smile. No, that
Good morning, and thank you for coming to our wonderful panel this morning. And thank you to Joe Wagner and the wonderful Sue, who's made all this possible, and to Senator Brandes for hosting us and making Florida the autonomous capital of North America. We're going to have a wonderful discussion today about the future of Florida, jobs, and autonomous vehicles. And I'd like to ask our distinguished panelists to give a quick little 30-second interview about yourself.
Hey guys, my name is Stefan Seltz-Oxmacher, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Starsky Robotics. At Starsky Robotics, we are regularly operating autonomous trucks on Florida highways. We've been doing that since January of 2017, and essentially the thesis behind the company is that the long-haul truck driver shortage is real. The reason for that shortage is that it's really, really hard to get a person to spend a month at a time in a truck. I mean, I know I don't want to do it. So what we're doing is we're making trucks autonomous on the long stretches of highway that are fairly easy to be autonomous, and then remote controlled or teleoperated for the first and last mile.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming so early. I'm Jason Eichenholz. I am co-founder and CTO of Luminar Technologies. We're a high-tech company. We develop the vision systems for autonomous vehicles. We are a Florida company. Our largest operation is here in the state of Florida. We're growing, we're dynamic, we're a venture capital based backed company, which is possible to do here in the state of Florida. I'm a UCF, my bio's in the program. I'm a UCF graduate from the Creole program with my PhD. Been down here since '93. I understand Florida and Florida driving real well, sometimes unfortunately. But we really want to provide vision and perception for self-driving vehicles. And our core is really in the LiDAR technology. We've got some really unique twists on how we build our LiDAR systems from the chip level up to have unprecedented levels of performance for vision. We had some really good news yesterday with Volvo. If you guys want to go check that out, you can see our partnership with Volvo and how, as our LiDAR systems have become more and more advanced, we're able to provide a much higher level of perception to the point where not even just seeing if there's a human or a pedestrian on the side of the road, but to actually watch their gait. So that's a really important part of what we're trying to do to get safer than human driving performance from an autonomous vehicle.
Hello, everyone. My name is Oliver Cameron, and I'm co-founder and CEO of Voyage. We are bringing about driverless ride-sharing, entirely hands-off driving, where someone can just step into a car and travel from point A to point B. Our belief is that the current status quo, the current transportation system, is fundamentally broken. It's unsafe, it's inefficient, and just in general, not very accessible. Our first deployment is here in Florida at The Villages, a massive, massive retirement city, 160,000 people, 750 miles of road, and that's going to be our first large-scale autonomous ride-sharing service.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Joe Provenzano, Ford AV LLC. So I handle all of our new markets in operations on the AV side. And we've been operating, and obviously here down in Miami this past year was our first city that we launched. So from a Ford perspective, what we're really looking to do is build the learnings and the technology so we can develop and launch and go to market in 2021 with a full self-driving vehicle business on a supporting ecosystem. So we're really excited to be here today to talk about some of the stuff that we're learning and things we're working on.
Awesome. As you can see, all of our panelists are fully invested in Florida, and I like to kick off the conversation, Oliver, with simple, why Florida?
Because it's awesome.
That's awesome.
But seriously, the reason for us to be in Florida, selfishly, is that the types of communities that we want to deliver driverless ride-sharing in exist in large volumes here. I literally Googled largest retirement community in the USA. And of course, the Villages, Florida popped up. And then working backwards from that, you just kind of research just how forward-thinking the state of Florida has been on AV regulation and just being, incredibly welcoming to startups and large companies to develop the technology here. It just all made sense for us. So we're super proud to be in Florida.
So it's made sense for you, and Ford, why does it make sense for you?
So from a Ford perspective, I think when we're looking at cities and where we want to start developing our self-driving business, it comes down to collaborating and working with partners and stakeholders. So when you ask the question, Grayson, why Florida? And I think in particular for us, it was why Miami? And it really comes down to collaborative and progressive county. So Miami-Dade County was huge and a huge factor in our decision to go to Miami. You combine that with, from a business model perspective, we're looking for high demand from a relative, from looking at moving goods and moving people, so making sure that we have the demand opportunity there. And then it also goes to climate. We're talking about technology where we have to be able to function and learn, and Miami was a really, really good opportunity and a great selection for us.
Well, Miami was a great opportunity for you. Jason, you and I had a wonderful conversation last night, and you have a very important story to tell about UCF and what that university has been able to do to help Luminar grow here.
Yeah, so we often get asked, why Florida? And frankly, we're at a disadvantage when it comes to being a high-tech company, trying to raise venture capital. Why can't we do this in Silicon Valley? Why do you need to be there? And we have a really good answer for that. And I think any company trying to raise venture capital needs to have that. And this is where the talent is. I was attracted to the state of Florida by the University of Central Florida for their optics and photonics program. We have a really strong partnership with the University of Central Florida. John Hitt, so we were in stealth for 5 years before we came out of stealth. So 6 years ago, we were starting this company. We chose Florida a lot because of the partnership with UCF and the defense industry. But when John Hitt said that he wanted to have UCF be the leading partnership university, we wanted to take advantage of that. The same thing under Dale Whitaker. We absolutely have strengthened that partnership, and we're actually the closest physical commercial building to the UCF campus. We actually keep our simulated targets, our calibrated targets, are actually sitting 250 meters out in the distance on UCF property. We have land use agreements. They've been great, great partners. But the last thing about why we're here in Florida is because this is where the talent and the ecosystem for LiDAR technology is. A lot of this technology is born in Florida. A lot of the fundamental science and engineering on LiDAR technology is in the same research park that our offices are in today. And so we've got Lockheed Martin Missile and Fire Control, Northrop Grumman, you've got L3, you've got NASA, and you've got Harris, all with major optics and photonics programs in our backyards. We've been able to assemble a team of talented men and women with over a millennia of experience in designing LiDAR technology and laser systems for deployment in the real world. That's a great unfair competitive advantage. It's something we're continuing to take advantage of.
And Stefan, you went through Y Combinator, and how did you end up here in Florida, and why?
Yeah, so I actually ended up in Florida before we were in Y Combinator. So I am by far the least qualified person on this panel, in this industry, probably in this room. In August of 2015, I went on a road trip and came up with this thought that, hey, I know there's this problem in long-haul truck driving. What if you made trucks remote control? What if you made them remote control sometimes, autonomous other times? And you know, I wasn't out of Google, I wasn't out of Stanford, I wasn't out of UCF. So essentially, I just spent the first 6 months or so reading. Reading all of those articles that come out 3 times a day on autonomous vehicles, autonomous trucks, reading the state regs for most of the states that had regs in 2015, most of the countries who had thoughts about what the regs should be for autonomous vehicles. And in all of this noise, there's a lot of talk about Nevada's autonomous law, there's a lot of talk about California's autonomous law. There was almost no talk about Florida's autonomous law, which was shocking, given that I think it was in 2012 or 2013 that Senator Brandis first passed Florida's particularly progressive autonomous vehicle law. And it was a law that made it a lot easier to work with. At this point, Nevada had already required you to have about 15,000 test miles before you could do anything on a public road, which 15,000 miles at the test track does not seem super valuable or a super cheap way to get to a point where you can test. California already had incredibly overly prescriptive laws on what you could or could not do. So actually, I first came to Florida for autonomous vehicles at the summit in 2015. And it was largely be like, hey, what's going on here? The FAV summit was a fairly different summit back then. But what I saw was, okay, the regulations are real. This is a real place where we could actually go and deploy autonomous unmanned vehicles. There's no longer a regulatory reason to not have these deployed. It's only a technical reason, it's only a business reason, and when you get rid of a big regulatory hurdle for a frontier tech company like ours, you have a much, it's one less major hurdle to solve, and that's part of why we came to Florida, because the environment you guys have built here.
Well, that's awesome. And Joe, in 2017, Ford reported the California DMV, 0 autonomous miles driven on public roads. February 2018, you announced that you're coming to the great state of Florida, Miami. Was that due to, why Miami, not Silicon Valley? Was this due to the regulatory environment in California?
Well, I think it goes back to what I said initially when I alluded to why Florida and then specifically why Miami. But a huge part of that was Miami-Dade County. So them being progressive and want to work with us and collaborate on developing the technology, identifying needs and solutions that they had from a city perspective, in focusing on that, I think was really huge. And then the population density obviously lends itself, as I mentioned earlier, from a moving goods and moving people perspective. When we come to market in 2021, our plan is not to just develop self-driving vehicle technology. Our plan is to develop a self-driving vehicle business and supporting ecosystem. So having all those things in place is really important, and Miami was a great fit.
Miami is a great county, and the state has allowed the autonomous industry to do all sorts of stuff. Stefan, you ran the autonomous truck. California, you'd be in jail, but here you're not. Is that, you gonna continue?
I don't think I'd quite be in jail, but it certainly would be a different picture. So California's autonomous vehicle law is very much written as a long-standing, this is the permanent forever thing. Trucks seem hard. Let's define what a truck is in 5 different ways to make sure that trucks can't do anything above level 2 in California. And that's kind of why we haven't been doing so much testing of important stuff in California. So some of the cool things that we've done in Florida since that first on-road test in January of 2017. So we were first hauling freight on the Florida Turnpike in January of 2017. We first were able to get paid for it and start doing it regularly March, April of that year. We first did a meaningful end-to-end zero disengagement trip in Florida on Alligator Alley in September of 2017, and that was hauling water for Hurricane Irma relief. And then we did our first ever fully unmanned test down in Hendry County, just south of Lake Okeechobee, in February of 2018. And all of that, what's been great about the way that Florida regulations are set up is that it's been very easy for us to build close relationships with different members of government, different regulators, so that we've always been far above and beyond what is required by state statute. So we've never had an adversarial relationship with our regulators, like many of my peers in California have.
Oliver, the Villages has all sorts of interesting reputations. You Googled the Villages and found it. I'm sure you found a lot of other stuff we won't discuss here. But what's next for the Villages, and are we going to get my holy grail of autonomous golf carts that track the ball?
You got some laughs for that. Good job. So the way we've been thinking about this is that you may have seen in the media there's been this kind of pullback on complexity in recent, let's call it the last 12 months. You've seen that some of the more major programs are just taking a little longer than they thought. And this is a very hard problem, so it's not super surprising. But early on, we decided that we wanted to constrain the problem. But we didn't want to constrain it so much that we'd end up, in an empty parking lot, right? Just doing something that adds no value to the world. So we stumbled really upon this whole concept of a retirement community. I'm from the UK, and there is no such concept in the UK of a retirement community like they are here in the US. And the reason we kind of chose that is because we've got this sort of deployment checkbox or series of checkboxes that we need to fulfill. And the first is that, yes, the environment is solvable. It may not be the most simple environment in the world, like a parking lot, but it's constrained on speed, less vehicles on the road, just in general, slower pace of life. But then you've also got a population which increasingly is growing older and older, but is not giving up vehicle ownership or vehicle driving sooner, which means that folks that have vision issues, muscle degeneration, more severe issues like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, just have really crummy transportation options. So when you pair those two together, plus this idea that you have this central authority, the Villages is a corporation, as you guys may know. When you pair all those three things together, it very much, looks like the perfect deployment. Show of hands, how many people have visited the Villages here? It's more than I thought, which is great. So you'll probably know that when you enter it, it feels like this different world, which is why they call it Disneyland for adults, right? So for us, when we were looking and seeking the kinds of deployments we wanted to do, with places like the Villages, it just felt absolutely perfect. So our goal there is to solve the transportation pain points they have. We want to deliver 5-minute ETA, fully autonomous vehicle that can take them from point A to point B, and do that for all 125,000 residents. And with that those series of checkboxes and everything that comes with it, it felt like the absolute perfect place. So that's kind of what's next for us. to launch that service and keep expanding.
Then when individuals such as those in this room visit the villages, will they be able to take a ride as well, or will it be for residents only?
If they're 65 plus.
Oh, I don't think that qualifies a lot of individuals in this room. Jason, we all know, Florida has its own unique challenges and advantages. And on our pre-call, you talked about love bugs, and I had no idea what love bugs are. And, well, not at the villages. That's a different kind of a love bug.
I'm hearing the giggles in the room. This is great. All right, show of hands. Who knows what love bugs are? Okay. Now, imagine you're in an autonomous vehicle. You're driving through love bug season, and your sensor suite is now covered in love bugs. How long does it take you all or me to pull over to a gas station to scrub away to try and get those bugs off the windshield, right? Show of hands. Who understands that problem? Now there's no driver. Your passenger's going to get out and do that? Really? The Parkinson's patients in the villages is going to go do that? I don't think so. So we have our unique challenges, and whether it's a LiDAR sensor or a camera sensor, it doesn't matter. As a human driver, you can't see through the bugs. It's a challenge. So we need to anticipate that, because I don't know if you've ever done it with your trucks during love bug season.
Yeah. So we were having a ride along with CNN, and I had certainly never heard of love bug season. So we're doing this ride along where, this is maybe a year and a half ago. We're super nervous. We're going to be on TV. Oh boy. And there are just bugs all over the place. We're driving back and forth on this stretch of the turnpike, and every 5 minutes the windshield is full of insects. You were mentioning they're attracted to the CO2?
It's the CO or CO2. Basically, where cars are, they congregate, which is why they're right on. It's like, why is it snowing love bugs on the turnpike? The vehicle emissions are attracting the bugs to the highway.
So one of my Florida-based test drivers went so far. That wasn't quite the description he used. What he said was they had a particular attraction to white vehicles, which meant they were particularly all over our white truck, which was extra fun in front of these reporters. What was interesting though, and kind of only I really started to understand after my co-founder explained it to me, is the position between the front-facing lens and the actual camera are so close for our camera sensors that the light diffracts around the dead bug. So a way to think about that is if you have some water on your windshield, if you have some water on your glass, from far away, it might occlude the image, it might occlude what you're able to see, it might make it difficult. But if you put your face really, really close to it, if you put your eyes really, really close to it, the light will diffract around that water and go into your eye, and you'll be able to see through it.
What happens, Jason, when we have EVs if they're attracted to CO2? Do love bugs magically go away?
Well, they're certainly not going to go away if anyone walks in the parking lot towards a car. But I think it will be less concentration with EVs, and we thought about that on the highways. But either way, just like if you're operating an autonomous vehicle up north, you need to be able to handle road salts and the conditions associated with winter. You need to be able to accommodate in Florida that 1 month-ish a year where you need to be able to have love bugs. There are ways to combat that, and there's ways to make sure that, we have to design our anti-reflection coatings on the windows to handle the pH of the love bugs so they don't pit and erode the sensor suite. And then you have air blades and other things. Yeah, and who would have thought you were coming to an autonomous vehicle summit discussion on a panel to hear about love bugs?
And their reproductive habits.
Yes. But here we are, it's the reality of the state, and there are certainly things we are doing to make sure that love bugs are a non-issue, but it's part of our challenges.
And there's a lot of unique challenges, and anybody that's working in autonomous vehicles can tell you we have love bugs, and I've had naked people dancing in front of that car in autonomous vehicles when I've gone on rides in the valley because I think it's funny. Joe, Ford in Miami, have you seen anything interesting or funny?
I haven't experienced the love bugs at this point, but maybe we're going to change the name to this summit in the future. Yeah, so from a Miami perspective, I think there's a lot of different things, and it's to sort of what Jason was alluding to. Anytime that you're operating in a city, you're selecting a location that you're going to operate and develop technology, you're going to have unique challenges in identifying what those are. I think one of the things that's been great about Miami is the diverse culture, so the Spanish-speaking community. And for us to take and try to develop our technology, and when we do pilots with Domino's and Postmates, and we're developing technology to communicate seamlessly with people, I think that's been very unique to Miami, and it's been great from a learning perspective on our part for this past year. I think another thing too, and you think of Miami and you think of really nice weather all the time. I hadn't spent a ton of time in Miami to this past year, so the past 11 months I spent a tremendous amount of time there, and the pockets of torrential downpour out of nowhere just sort of blew my mind when I first went down to Miami. And it's another reality that we have to deal with. So there's going to be obstacles from a climate perspective. There's going to be characteristics within cities that we have to identify. And I think the Ford approach, as we work through learnings in Miami and we start thinking about subsequent launch cities, is cataloging and understanding what those unique items are, and then how can we actually take some of those learnings, because some of them are going to apply to subsequent launch cities and some of them aren't, but it's going to make us much more effective as we continue to expand. And so to date, it's been great.
And we're laughing because Oliver has a very active Twitter account, and you have the CCTV camera from the villages, and you've posted people driving over mediums, driving backwards, all sorts of interesting things. How is your tech going to handle these unpredictable drivers that on a seemingly weekly basis you're posting a new video of a driver not driving normally?
Yes, I have the largest catalog, I think, of driver mistakes on the planet. So I think the way we think about this is that the crucial piece of handling any sort of chaos on the roads is being able to perceive that object as far in advance as you possibly can, right? And Jason's obviously a big believer in this as well. So for us, that's why LiDAR matters. When we have a vehicle on the road, our vehicles are able to see close to 300 meters and 360 degrees around us at relatively high resolution, higher resolution than a human can, and of course in 360 degrees. And with LiDAR, of course, what you get for free is depth. You understand those objects around you and just how far away those objects are. So when we see crazy situations, like someone driving down the wrong side of the road, the most important thing is, yes, you can see that object as far away as you can and react accordingly. The next step after perceiving is, of course, that you actually do something with that information, that you make decisions based on what you perceive that are intelligent and similar to what a human might do in that chaotic situation. So although we've not optimized our tech stack for the crazy edge cases of someone driving down the wrong side of the road, we do take into account those sorts of behaviors and try and do what we call a safe stop, which is effectively pull over to the side of the road. So yeah, I'm happy to share those videos. There's lots of them.
You can follow Oliver on Twitter and watch all sorts of interesting village issues. Jason, Oliver hit the nail on the head. LiDAR matters, and it does matter. As we move towards full autonomy, what are some of the engineering challenges we have to overcome?
Yeah, so in my mind, it's easy to make, and we said this publicly, it's very easy to make an autonomous vehicle work 99% of the time. It's the edge cases. It's the person driving the wrong way or turning wrong or so I don't look at all your videos, Oliver, but I have another thing I do sometimes late at night as I'm trying to get the kids to go to bed is I watch Russian dash cam videos. I'm working, right? Could we see that? Could we predict that? Could we help our partners see that soon enough that they can do route planning and changes to avoid that? Sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes the answer is absolutely we could have, if you can see things far enough away, especially in a highway environment. Driving straight in a highway is a great use case, great way to go, but when you're in a dynamic environment where there are lots of pedestrians, and just as an example, there's a difference legally between a person walking a bicycle and a person riding a bicycle. And these self-driving cars today are having a hard enough time telling if it's a bicycle, and we can tell the difference between the two. So it's that level of knowing what it is to know whether or not you need to give right away, how you're going to do your prediction, how you're going to do your planning is really important. I think the other thing, LiDAR, we think LiDAR matters, and we think it matters for another reason. It's very high quality data, provides high spatial resolution, it's inherently 3D, you have a 3D point cloud, it becomes the primary sensor in the car. You then have camera and radars, and those systems are there to look at traffic lights and to supplement each other, to have functional safety, which is something isn't really talked about within autonomous vehicles today. And all of that does another thing, and that reduces the compute burden in the trunk of these cars. If you ever want to see what an autonomous vehicle really looks like, pop the trunk and look at the separate air conditioning unit that they need for the trunk of the car and the kilowatts of power that are in these trunks, and you realize why having high quality data going in is so important. Because otherwise, if you don't solve that, you know, all these electric vehicles with these literally heaters and refrigerators in the trunks of the cars is a major engineering challenge. And it's something that we are able to do because the higher quality data that we're providing, our partners are saying they can reduce their computational budget by an order of magnitude.
Stefan, trucks, you have more space. Some of them have cooling units. What are some of the unique challenges for autonomous trucking?
Yeah, so we are pretty non-dogmatic or unorthodox across the board. So we are one of the few companies in the broader space that doesn't use LiDAR. We have a lot of space that we could keep full of sensors, we could keep full of extra compute stacks. There's still mostly a lot of empty space in the back of our truck. The way that we solve a lot of the bigger, harder problems of autonomy is not driving in the places that they present themselves. So, you know, I haven't met someone who has a particularly intellectually honest answer for how to drive in the snow when it has recently snowed a couple of inches. So we just say we're not going to send our trucks places where it snows. Down the line, maybe we'll figure out how to drive in the snow. Maybe we'll drive places where it snows when it's not currently snowing. But that's the state of the trucking industry is that it's so large. We can be reasonably successful and just not even think about that problem. Similarly, for the torrential downpours that Joe was mentioning, one time I was in one of our trucks and we turned the system off because 8 feet of rain per foot on the ground were falling per second. And we're on the highway and everyone's going 45, 55 miles an hour really close together. And I thought, wow, how could we ever drive safely in this condition? And then I thought, probably no one can. Probably if there was real, computer logic to what all the people on the road were doing, they would be pulled over on the side of the road, but it's way too important for them to get to Target to buy that special thing at that last minute, whatever, that they're refusing to pull themselves over. Whereas our truck doesn't have a person in it, and it can wait on the side of the road for hours a day until conditions are such that it can easily, safely drive. So the real way that we're tackling a lot of these hard problems is we're cheating. And we're saying, nah, I don't want to.
But when it snows, now that we're going into the Christmas season, you can, brand it as Santa sled and get a big PR win.
That's true. I mean, it would be cool. It'd be cool to drive in the snow. It'd be cool to drive in Miami. It'd be cool to drive in Tokyo. But trucking is an $800 billion a year industry in the US alone. More than half of that is in the chunks of the country that it doesn't snow. Big chunks of that are in individual states with large populations. Florida has a really large population. We can kind of just forget about any of those issues by geofencing our solution around them.
And I think trucking has another advantage is that the localization problem is much easier. You're not in an urban environment. You don't have GPS bounce. These self-driving cars in urban environments spend a lot of effort to figure out exactly where are they, because the odometry isn't doing it. So, driving in open highways is while you're moving faster, and you need to be able to see further somehow to be able to predict and plan, and because you're carrying a lot of weight.
80,000 pounds going 65 miles an hour.
Right. And so that's, we are able to see 7 seconds ahead at those, almost 8 seconds ahead at that speed. That's really important versus being nearsighted where you just don't have that vision. But a highway environment is by far the most forgiving environment, even with the velocity that you have, compared to trying to operate in an urban environment.
Oliver, operating in an urban environment as you work towards full autonomy, what engineering challenges are you facing at Voyage?
Lots of challenges. To quickly preface, one of our beliefs is that there is now an ecosystem in autonomous vehicles. If you kind of rewound 5 years ago, if we were starting a company then, effectively we'd have to build not only our own autonomous stack, but our own simulation engine, mapping, teleoperations, maybe even our own sensors. We'd have to outfit the vehicle ourselves, a whole bunch of stuff that you'd kind of bucket under quote-unquote infrastructure. Today, though, there's a whole host of great startups that solve just those vertical challenges so that we don't have to spend any time thinking about simulation, building our own, mapping the world, all those sorts of things. So what that means for... Oh, go ahead, Grayson. No? Go ahead. Okay, sure. So with those problems, solved for us, what we then really try and focus on is the autonomous piece, which kind of breaks down super high level to 2 areas. Perception and decision making. Can you perceive the world, and can you make good judgment calls based on how you perceive the world and then actuate the vehicle to navigate those things? So there's a host of challenges that the industry itself, never mind just Voyage, but the industry itself hasn't solved just yet. One that I find quite interesting is that if you are perceiving the world, one of the common things you'll see is this idea that you need to be able to accurately detect and classify objects. And it's very simple to get a basic, kind of to Jason's point, 99% rudimentary version of that. But when you want the extra 0.99999%, it gets quite tricky. One example of that is this problem of clustering. So let's say me and Joe are very close together on the road, like this, and our car using LiDAR sees this kind of cluster of points right here. Well, if you use kind of old school computer vision, it's going to assume that we're just one giant blob of stuff, which is not particularly great when you want to accurately classify and then not only classify but predict what this particular blob is going to do next, and then take precautionary actions for that. So the next step, which we've spent the last 2 years working on, is okay, how can you perceive much better to make sure that you can see 2 things instead of just one? And what we've seen in the last, the industry's seen, and just technology in general, is the last 3-4 years, artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, whatever you want to call it, has advanced to such a point that you can train neural networks to effectively segment and cluster appropriately. Because traditional computer vision will say 2 things are one, but a machine has seen multiple different examples of 2 people that have been appropriately classified as 2 individual people, that it can then make that decision on the fly and better perform. So there's a host of stuff, but that's one example which the industry 2-3 years ago didn't have fully solved. Today, perception is at such a point that you can do that kind of in your sleep.
Yeah, so sort of following up on that is there's also 2 different types of highway driving. There's normal highway driving, and then there's I-4. and I drive on I-4 quite often. We're in Orlando, and I-4 can literally change overnight. Overnight, an exit can be in a different location. Overnight, the lanes can have moved to a whole new area, and the mapping can't keep up with that. It's changing that rapidly. More importantly, as Oliver talked about the perception and being able to classify, well, a big part of it is the localization of where am I with respect to the lanes. The same reason you don't want to operate in the snow is you can't see the lane markings. You don't know where you are. You can't rely on the 2 trails ahead of you. The same problem is when you've got a lot of construction and you've got all these lane markings. You have the lane markings from N-1 and N-2 of when you were driving down that road. the computer systems just go haywire trying to figure that out. And it is a computational challenge today. So having the highest quality sensor suites to provide that data where it may be using the information like the Jersey barriers and other things is a real challenge in a dynamically changing environment.
And with engineering challenges, there's business model challenges. And Joe, Ford's been very vocal, the partnerships with Postmates and Walmart. What have you learned in Miami as you start to develop the business models for the future of autonomy?
Great question. So I think that's a huge focus. Just talking about all the technical challenges that we have to work with when we're developing self-driving vehicle technology. I know our approach at Ford is, and I mentioned it earlier, is developing a full self-driving business and supporting services. And an ecosystem, essentially. So we're talking about a lot of different parts. And so from a business model perspective, when we're working with Domino's, Postmates, we're starting to get the foundational understandings. What are those pain points when we're talking about moving goods? What do we have to solve for? How do we layer in our technology to solve and build viable solutions for business partners? And when we talk about that ecosystem, and from a business perspective, when you talk about business models, it has to be a full complement. So we're talking about not just delivering in 2021 when we come to market a purpose-built AV vehicle with the SDS, with our partners at Argo, but we're also talking about operations, fleet management. How are we going to utilize those vehicles and maximize the utilization of those vehicles to be profitable? What is the technology stack that we have to have? There's been a lot of conversation and discussion probably the last couple of days on connected vehicles and sort of cities that are connected in that infrastructure. So having those operations and having the technology stack to then orchestrate that, and then you add in the layer of what are your business partnerships. So then we look at the demand. So we're working with multiple partners to really understand what are the opportunities that we can leverage and how can we build solutions that make sense for those partners, the cities that we're in, and then for the communities as well. So we're really looking at from a broad approach. And to your initial question, those are the building blocks right now. So as we're developing the knowledge and the learnings with all of the different business partners that we're working with, it's really building to allow us to develop that 2021 strategy when we come to market.
The one thing I think this room would love to know, and I'd like to know, so when you deliver a pizza, are the individuals coming down to the autonomous to pick it up, or are you having to have somebody go up there and deliver to their door?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It's one of the things when you talk about moving goods and moving people, it's two different things. When you're talking about moving people, it's a set pickup drop-off point where someone's getting in and out of a vehicle. When you talk about moving goods in the pizza delivery, you now have added the first 50 feet, and you also have the last 50 feet. So part of what we're trying to learn right now when we do our partnerships with Postmates and Domino's is what's the willingness to walk? If you're in a high-rise, are you going to walk down to the curb? How do we structure that? How do we design the vehicle so you as a customer know that it's there? How are you tracking the vehicle? How are you interfacing and interacting with the vehicle? Those are all challenges that we're identifying and creating solutions for. But those are the things that we're learning about now because we have the opportunity ahead of 2021 to really take those learnings from a business perspective and from a technology perspective, and we can curve our business models and really implement that into the technology as we develop it.
And Stefan, trucking, you move a lot of goods. What are you learning, and what type of partnerships are you exploring in the trucking space?
Yeah, so part of what's interesting about the trucking space is you'd be very right to come to the conclusion that it's probably not tech forward. It's a lot of things are still being done with faxes, a lot of just kind of across the board. Technology hasn't really taken hold in the trucking industry like it has in many or all other industries. What's neat though, and what's been particularly neat for us, has been that even though this is an industry where many of the participants might even avowedly hate technology, the problem of truck drivers is so incredibly painful that they're more than willing to have all freight hauled by robots tomorrow. So whereas we've had loads brokered to go into our trucks by freight brokers who don't use smartphones and don't ever want to use smartphones because that's a dumb gadget. So we've found this to be a really different industry. The broader problem of truck drivers has created a situation where long-haul truck drivers themselves, if they're company drivers as opposed to owner-operators, they might not really do anything besides actuate the pedals, actuate the steering wheel, and then open and close the trailer doors. They're not responsible for loading, unloading. If they're a company driver, they're not responsible for maintenance. They're not responsible for how do you change a tire if you get a flat on the side of the road. All of that stuff has already been pushed off to other operating people, which kind of makes the problem that we have to solve an already fairly tightly bound box around actuating and driving a vehicle. In the broader world and role of partnerships, I've kind of, from the get-go, been leery of being an overly partnership-reliant company, which is also different from a lot of the autonomous industry. What we're doing in the autonomous industry is super complex. There's a lot of great arguments to be made about developing a single core competency and letting other companies develop their core competencies and then building yourself together. That all sounds really nice and really good. But the reality is that most startups are terrible. Actually, I'd say all startups are terrible. All corporates are terrible. All companies are terrible for one reason or another. Whatever entity pays your bills, you probably have a lot of complaints about. And us relying on another company to make our company successful is a really easy way to tie our destiny up with yet another terrible company. So we've gone from the get-go with a, hey, if we're taking this narrowly constrained problem, how can we narrowly constrain it even more so that we can do it all ourselves? When I first started on this, I sent an email to an R&D lab for one of the major truck OEMs and was like, hey guys, I know there's a data port on your trucks. Could we get the API to plug into that and just issue commands and drive your truck via that? And I could hear this like senior engineer laughing over email. He told me, probably maybe in 5 years, and then maybe another 5 years for every tier 1, tier 2 supplier underneath us that you want to integrate with. So while that data port wasn't an option, what was an option is that every truck has pedals. Every truck has a steering wheel. You can push pedals. You can actuate a wheel. So even for the actuation of our vehicles, we went on a path without needing to actually partner with the OEM, which gave us a lot more flexibility down the road when we decided we wanted to switch from the vehicles of one OEM to another. Not using kind of more experimental sensors, more experimental other software stacks from other companies has meant that when there's a problem in our system, it's almost certainly our code base. It's not our Delphi radar, it's not our FLIR camera that's having a problem. It's we integrated it poorly. It's we wrote bad code. And when half the debugging is already done for you, you're able to move a lot faster.
And you put out a video called Long Haul on YouTube, and you said a line, I want to read it to you because I want your opinion on this. Any good idea has perspectives of why it's a bad idea. Every idea has an argument against it, good or bad. Is that based on this experience that you've had dealing with the non-technical, forward-thinking trucking industry, or where's that coming from?
So I went to school. So I was born in New York City. I grew up outside D.C. I went to college in Philly, and then for some reason I moved to San Francisco. I had there's this weird thing that happens when you live in San Francisco, that there's often some friend or acquaintance of yours who ends up reaching out to you last minute because they're interviewing for a software job and they want to hang out. I noticed something with my friends from Philly, that they're always incredibly underimpressed with these very self-important software companies. And one thing that he said to me, and this was maybe in like 2014 when Uber was like the coolest company in all of Silicon Valley, the whole world, and they're the best. He said that he enjoyed his interview with Uber more than he did his interview with Google. I was like, well, why? I mean, why wouldn't you be excited to interview at Uber? Everyone and their brother wants to work at Uber these days. And he said, well, they're pretty much just a taxi company. And in Philadelphia, that's very much the mindset that I always saw. Like, Google is a bad idea for a company. Like, why don't you know what website you want to go to? Like, why do you need to Google it? Just, you're going to go to Facebook. You're going to go to Amazon. Why do you need Google? So that perspective really shaped kind of how I viewed when I wanted to start my own company, and something that I was really excited about when I started working on this. Like, yeah, people thought, oh, self-driving trucks won't work. Yeah, this won't be legal. This won't be this. That won't be that. But no one actually really questioned the value of a self-driving truck, even among my friends who could question the value of this bottle of water, those candies, these name cards, whatever.
And on the opposite end of the spectrum with partnerships, Jason, you've been very, very vocal and very active. You have the public deal with Volvo. If that hasn't kept you busy enough, what's coming next?
Yeah, so we actually, we've been really busy. We've only announced 2 partnerships publicly. One was with Toyota TRI. We were, when we do partnerships and we announce it, it's very well planned and very well choreographed, because we really take the privacy and security of our partners very, very seriously. And so Volvo, we announced we've got another 13 in the pipeline that we're working with, and the partnerships go very deep. We don't sell them a system and say, here you go. Most of the customers are working on full stack solutions, or they want to develop full stack solutions. They're struggling. And they're struggling more than they admit publicly, because this is a really, really hard problem. And this goes, there's sort of 2 camps. There's the OEMs, and even within the OEMs, there's the ones that have the resources, like Ford does in their partnership with Argo, GM with their partnership with Cruise, to companies, Volvo's got some really good, strong partners, and there's those that don't. And on the opposite end are the tech companies. And the tech companies are coming at this from a very different direction. They're coming at it unencumbered, such as Oliver, unencumbered by the traditional business models and mindsets of OEMs, where this is closed, you can't have access to that port, that's proprietary information. And they're much more innovative, but they don't have necessarily the resources. And so what we do is we partner with them very deeply. We embed engineers within their facilities. We're there for at least a week, sometimes for a month, on some of the customers, to help them bring our technology in, get the software up and running, be able to understand what a high quality, high definition 3D point cloud looks like. Some customers are more hands off. And then when we invert the pyramid on their perception engine, we understand where their compute burden is going. We're able to get a unique insight. And if you get a unique insight into one customer, and then you can translate all of that insight across another 15, you have a very, very unique view into the state of the autonomous vehicle industry. And frankly, as much as I talk about self-driving cars, as proud as I am about self-driving cars, it is a real uphill battle in terms of what's required to do so. And we really leverage those partnerships to make sure we are applying pressure in the areas that are the pain points for the industry.
While it's an uphill battle in their pain points, it's going to do a lot of good for a lot of people. And at the villages, there's some individuals that unfortunately don't have the ability to be mobile. You're going to change their lives, and you're going to allow them the freedom to go to the hairdresser, go to a movie, go out to dinner. What are some really good feel-good stories that you've seen so far from the villages?
Yeah, no, that's why we do what we do. So one email I got recently was from the head of the Low Vision Club at the villages. And the Low Vision Club has a few hundred members, and they meet regularly to discuss pain points that they see every day. And he sent me this very long email that was really, really awesome. And effectively, he was making the case that what he hears on a daily basis is they'd have 10 times the number of members if there was actually a good way for people to move from their homes to this club in an affordable way. Because what currently happens is there is a kind of friends and family model where you'll ask your neighbor to drive you, or maybe there's a family member that comes to town every so often to move you around. Maybe if you're really vision impaired, you'll have a full-time, maybe a carer, something like that. Or you can use the very expensive old-school taxi service that exists there. Think about what life was like pre-Uber, 36-hour in advance booking, 5 times the cost, all that sort of stuff. So just reading this email just kind of opened my eyes, because when we think about self-driving cars, I think a lot of what, again, the kind of hype pertains to is city centers, is San Francisco, et cetera, but you look at the plethora of options and you just look outside and see millennials riding scooters, and it feels reasonably well taken care of from a transportation perspective. Doesn't mean it's not a big business, it totally is, but it's, when we think about the first impacts of AV, when we think about what comes with that, it felt like retirement communities feel just absolutely perfect because you're actually solving a problem that is not currently solved today. And what really makes all this work, and this is still a kind of question mark over the industry, is when self-driving cars become more cost-effective than personal ownership, or become more cost-effective than Uber and definitely old-school taxi companies. So that's what we run towards, that someone can summon a car, 5 minutes, shows up at their doorstep, and they can travel from point A to point B for less than if they'd had that car sat in their parking lot or parking garage for most of the day. That's what we run after.
Jason?
Yeah, so you think about autonomous vehicles and the features and the things that I love to drive in autonomy, and I have a want. I have an 11-year-old daughter, so I don't want her driving. So as any dad wouldn't. The reality is that's a want. I want to have this technology beat her to when she gets her Florida driver's license. But there's a true need. All right. So I have a son. He's 13 and he has autism. I know for a fact he's never going to get a driver's license. How is he going to reliably, safely get from point A to point B? I don't care if he's working at Publix for his career, bagging groceries. I've got ideas on tech jobs for him and things we can do. It doesn't matter, but we have this whole segment of the population, to Oliver's point, that needs to safely get from point A to point B, that the current transportation infrastructure doesn't work. That highly motivates me, knowing that I'm going to have my son in the safest car possible to get him from point A to point B. And there are a lot of people in this industry who are thinking the same way. One of our rock star engineers is legally blind. Think about that. You have a legally blind manufacturing engineer designing and building the eyes for self-driving cars. How cool is that? Those are the types of people that are in this industry that are really trying to solve real-world problems. And for me, I look at all these challenges, I look at all the problems within the self-driving car community, and I know I want to go solve these because it's going to make a real difference for a lot of people that are being failed right now with the systems that are out there.
That's powerful, Jason, and you're right. I mean, transportation is failing a lot of people, and as an industry, we want to come together and do good, and provide those that are less fortunate, unable mobility, provide them mobility. And the blind gentleman leading the engineering, that's impressive. And until we get there, we have to have safe testing. And Ford, as Senator Brandes calls it, double black diamond in Miami. What are you doing to ensure safe testing in Miami?
So I think that's a great question. I think when you talk about safety in self-driving vehicles, it's a matter of intention and priority. So from a standpoint of Ford Motor Company, we're in the unique position where we can leverage over 100 years of developing vehicles and safety technology, in taking that same process that we have and that rigorous testing, the internal testing, the simulation testing, and essentially applying that to how we're approaching self-driving vehicle safety. So one of the things you'll know with our Argo team is we have 2 safety drivers at all times. So there's someone that's behind the wheel, an operator that's focused on the actual driving of the vehicle, and then we also have a researcher that's sitting in the co-pilot seat monitoring all of the technology that goes on. And so at Ford, we think, like I said, it's a matter of approach and making sure that safety is the #1 priority. So the way we're handling this, just focusing on that and making sure that we're at the correct safety levels before we bring things to market.
While the entire industry is focused on safety, the media is focused on single-handedly destroying this industry. With misleading headlines where remember the Waymo one got into an accident? Oh, Waymo car crashes into human car. Well, the car was not in autonomous mode, and the media loves nothing more than to create fear and scare the public that with this technology it's going to enhance every single life around the world. Oliver, as an industry, how do we come together to stop this blatant attack on the industry when we're trying to do so much good and they're trying to tear us down to sell ads?
It's a good question and quite a statement. So I think the reality is that, yes, there's a lot of articles and such that are out there that kind of miss the point of self-driving cars, and the common response is, well, there wasn't news report today of the few hundred deaths that happened on roadways today alone, just this one. But I think accepting the reality that this is a controversial technology that spans not just safety, but job loss and many other hot topics. I think accepting that reality and making sure that it's our responsibility as an industry to tell the story as it should be told, which is that this is a better product, a safer product, a more reliable, more cost-effective product every single day. But one thing we see as our responsibility is that we focus a lot of our time, as we've talked about, at the villages, and it's quite divisive there. Like we have a whole bunch of people that are very, very supportive of what we do. I would totally say the majority, but there's a minority there that definitely don't believe in autonomous vehicles. My own grandma, it's like, what the hell are you doing?
My grandma wants to go in and have a gin and tonic. So we got to get the two of them together.
Exactly. She's like, what the hell are you doing building self-driving cars? And that's real. So I think that's why it's important to not just be in California, because if you're in Silicon Valley, then yes, most everyone kind of gets it. But you step into Central Florida in a retirement community where the average age is about 72, you're going to get some pushback. So we spend a lot of our time at different events. Just yesterday, our Florida GM was at a event that's a club for bicyclists at the villages, trying to, again, tell the story that we can see your bikes further than humans can in 360 degrees. We can predict what they're going to do better than a human can predict, all that sort of stuff. So I think just we have to accept the reality that we have to tell a story, and it has to be one that is going to take some time to convince everyone. It's a controversial technology. That's okay. That's because it's going to be impactful.
I actually have a bit of a counterpoint to the thought that it's so unfair that the media is beating up on the autonomous industry. I think it's actually a really good sign that the media is beating up on the autonomous industry. As Oliver mentioned, 100 people died today in car accidents, 100 people died yesterday, 100 people are going to die tomorrow. Maybe, I don't know, let's say 30 of those deaths will be on a small town paper. Maybe 1 or 2 will be in the regional paper. Maybe there's a celebrity and it makes national news. Maybe a celebrity dies in a car accident this week, and that is the most likely one we're going to hear about because it's rare and it's newsworthy. Press writes stories about things that don't happen every day, because things that happen every day aren't exciting. Things that are bad and sad that happen every day aren't exciting. Whether it's 100 car deaths, whether it's children starving in foreign countries, if it happens all the time, it's not newsworthy. When a plane crashes, it's pretty newsworthy, right? It doesn't happen. It's shocking. It's scary. Oh my gosh. I fly in a plane twice a year, and a plane crashed a year and a half ago. I might die the next time I fly in a plane. Similarly, the incredible amount of media attention that the handful of autonomous deaths have received is an indication of their newsworthiness, not just because there is a compelling narrative to be told of tech companies gone awry, and that is a story that definitely sells ads. But more importantly than that, it's a rare story. It doesn't happen very often. I think if we're all on a panel like this in 20 years, and there's still a shocking, oh my gosh, someone dies in an autonomous vehicle story every 3 months, every 4 months, that would be pretty great, because that would mean maybe a handful, maybe 10, maybe 100 people are dying in car accidents a year, as opposed to 100 a day.
And you brought up a good point about the plane crash and fear. And as everybody knows, who knows me in this room knows that I'm a big believer in public acceptance and adoption. And SAE has taken incredible strides to build the public acceptance and adoption by hosting SAE demo days around the country. The next demo day will be taking place at Babcock Ranch down in Southwest Florida, the 12th or 15th of December. And we welcome everybody to come down and take a ride in an autonomous vehicle and learn about the technology. As we're getting the hook here to wrap up, I'd like to ask all of our panelists, to what is the one thing that you would like everybody in this room to take away with them today? We've discussed a lot, and we'll start with you, Joe.
Yeah, no, thanks. Really appreciate the opportunity being here. Thanks, Grayson, for moderating. And I think the two things that I'd like people to walk away when they think about Ford AV LLC and what we're trying to do is, and I've mentioned it earlier, is, you know, we're not just focused on the technology, we're focused on building solutions and services in a larger scope from a business model. So when we come to market in 2021, we want to have something that's sustainable and something that's viable. And I think the second key point is we're trying to do that focused on people, a human-centric approach. We're trying to understand and through the learnings and the testing that we're doing on how we can develop the service, how we can leverage the technology to add value to our consumers, our partners, and all of the stakeholders that we're working with. So those are two things that I'd really like people to walk away with on the approach that we're taking.
The thing I'd leave with is that I can imagine it's very confusing looking into the AV industry because in one article you hear that autonomous vehicles are going to be here in 6 months, and the other it's going to take 2 decades before they're here. I think the thing I would say is that autonomous vehicles, fully driverless vehicles with no test drivers in the front, will be here sooner than people think. They won't be everywhere, but in certain communities, certain environments, you'll see robots driving themselves fully driverlessly from point A to point B, places like the villages, perhaps.
Yeah, so I'm quite bullish on the technology. I'm quite bullish on where we're going. I agree actually with Oliver in that you're going to see things that are geo-constrained or operationally constrained. If it's raining or if it's snowing or other things, it's just not going to work. I think our partner Volvo's got a great vision of their highway autopilot where you get on, you personally drive your car, you get it, you essentially hit your cruise control, you go take a nap, you're sleeping, you're reading, you're doing whatever you need to do in a leisure mode, and then when you get to your exit, the car makes you take over and you drive back to your house. I think that's the future that's going to happen much faster than the ability to just go pick up and go anywhere. I think the technology companies are going to say, hey, a person wants to go from point A to point B, that's going to be a human driver that takes that route versus an autonomous vehicle whole route. The one thing I'd like everyone to take away here, and I really appreciate everyone paying attention and being in the room so early, is our goal at Luminar is to provide safer than human driving from autonomous vehicles. It's the equivalent, every working day, it's the equivalent of a 737 dropping out of the sky in vehicle fatalities in this country alone. Every working day. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, if that happened 3 days in a row, who's getting on an airplane on Thursday? Nobody. But it's geographically dispersed, it's in the noise, and even some of the different car companies get different exposures for when their car hits a fire truck in autonomous mode versus an Uber car, and different consequences. I also want to thank Senator Brandis for the level and the leadership that we've gotten to allow self-driving cars to operate in the state of Florida. My ask for everyone else is to understand what are you doing locally to ensure that companies such as Luminar, Voyage, whoever you're doing here at Starsky, wherever you are, that locally is also being taken care of to remove the regulatory burden to help our companies that are here in Florida grow and thrive.
So I'm obviously super keen on autonomous. We've talked about that. Super keen on safety. I think the thing I should really talk about in my little wrap-up minute is the difference between coming here in 2015 and coming here now. I grew up coming to Florida every summer. My grandma lived in Kissimmee, and I got to spend Camp Grandma going to Disney World and Universal Studios. Aunt in Jacksonville, who I visited quite a bit, and my fun cousin who lives down in Key West. When I moved to San Francisco, I never thought that I'd be doing a large chunk of my working life in Florida. And I think really the state of this conference, the state of the conversations that I've been having over the last 2 days, to paraphrase someone, the Jeff Brandis and the broader Florida regulatory body has made this state autonomous conference better than probably any national autonomous conference. This is really turned into a national group of people because of the leadership position that you all are in, that the state is in, and its ability to attract great companies to do cutting-edge work here, and its ability to allow those companies to then deploy cutting-edge technology so that Florida is going to be able to benefit from the safety and economic benefits far before states like California are going to. And that's a really cool thing, and I'm really glad and really proud to be a part of it. So thanks for all of you guys.
And, and thank you to our panelists for being a part of this, and thank you to Senator Brandes. But I think it's really important for everybody to understand that we're just getting started in Florida. The industry is going to continue to grow here. Companies are going to continue to relocate here. Jobs are going to be created here. And at some point, Florida is going to become the autonomous vehicle capital of North America. And people are going to say, well, how did California lose that mantle? Well, you have the gentleman over here to thank Senator Brandes, because he made this all possible for us. And he's single-handedly going to, with all of us together, going to transform the economy of Florida and do a lot of really wonderful things. So thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Joe Wagner and Robert Berlini back to the stage to announce the student poster winners.
Thank you, gentlemen. So I was going to come up and introduce Rob Bertini, who is the Executive Director of the Center for Urban Transportation Research, to announce the winners of the student poster competition. So I'm done. Rob?
Thank you very much, Joe. Bertini, it's all an Italian restaurant, I guess? No. And there's Bernini's in Ybor City, which I highly recommend. So thank you for sticking around for just a couple minutes before the break. We had 17 poster submissions this year from students at 8 Florida universities. Part of this event is to attract students and to encourage collaboration among the many great universities that we have here in the state of Florida. So without further ado, we would like to announce the winners of the poster competition. The third place winner is Stephen Spana from the University of Florida. Stephen, are you here?
Stephen?
Is Stephen here?
Stephen's sleeping in. If you are here,
All right. I don't see Stephen, but we will present him with his cash award later. Our second place winner is Emmanuel Kidando from FSU FAMU. Emmanuel, are you here? Okay. And our first place winner, I know she's here because she's participating in the Shark Tank session at 10:30. Jacqueline Masaki. Jacqueline, are you here? From FSU FAMU. So let's congratulate, is Jacqueline here? There she is. Excellent, congratulations. So while she's coming up, I will put in a plug for the session at 10:30, the Shark Tank. We have 6 Florida graduate students representing 6 universities. We'll be downstairs in the terrazzo room. We have 6 great sharks from industry, and Jacqueline is actually going to be speaking there, so if you want to come on up. Congratulations. So representing all of the students, congratulations to Jacqueline. So we'll try to get a photo. Thank you very much. So we'll see you downstairs. All right.
Enjoy your break and enjoy the breakout sessions, which come starting at 10:30. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy this break with our exhibitors. The breakout sessions begin at 10:30. We'll see you back here for lunch at noon and for the final session of the conference.